Welcome back to the Palace Circle. Princess Margaret spent much of her life under public scrutiny. Her daughter, Lady Sarah Chatto, built a life that newspapers could report on but rarely enter. That contrast has encouraged an easy story. Sarah walked away from her mother and from royal life itself. But that story leaves out the most revealing part. Years later, Sarah accepted responsibility for one of the artistic institutions closest to Margaret's heart. So did Lady Sarah turn away from Princess Margaret? Or did she find a way to love her mother without repeating the conditions that had made Margaret's life so exposed? Lady Sarah Chatto is not a mystery because nothing is known about her. She is a mystery because she is rarely offered the public the kind of access it has come to expect from a royal relative. There have been family occasions, public appearances, charity work, and official photographs. There has also been a career, a marriage, and a home life built well beyond the palace gates. What has been missing is the running explanation, the interview in which she turns family history into a personal confession, or the memoir that settles old arguments. That restraint is often mistaken for distance. A daughter of Princess Margaret, so the assumption goes, must either embrace the royal spotlight or reject it entirely. Sarah has done neither. She has kept her place in the family, attended important occasions, and taken on roles connected with the arts. At the same time, she has not made royal visibility the center of her working life. The distinction matters. Being less visible is not the same as being absent. For women who have watched royal stories unfold over decades, that distinction may feel familiar. Families are not always divided by a dramatic farewell. Sometimes a daughter makes her own household, protects its boundaries, and chooses not to narrate every feeling in public. The relationship can remain real, even when its most personal details remain private. Sarah's life invites that more careful reading. The question is not whether she was identical to Princess Margaret. She plainly was not. The more useful question is what she carried forward, what she declined to repeat, and why that combination has made her one of the least understood women in the wider royal family. Her mother's name draws people in. Sarah's choices are what make the story worth staying for. There is an answer in the work she chose, in the marriage she built, and in the responsibility she later accepted. It is not an answer built on secret conversations or invented scenes. It is visible in public records, in gallery walls, and in the organizations that trusted her with a family legacy. Before reaching that answer, it helps to see the particular world into which she was born. Lady Sarah Frances Elizabeth Armstrong-Jones was born on the 1st of May 1964 at Kensington Palace. She was the second child and only daughter of Princess Margaret and Anthony Armstrong-Jones, later the first Earl of Snowdon. Her older brother, David, was born a little over 2 years earlier. At the time of Sarah's birth, she stood 7th in the line of succession. It was a notable position, but it did not place her on the path of a central working royal. Her parents brought together two different worlds. Princess Margaret was the younger sister of Queen Elizabeth II, a woman whose life had been shaped by duty, public attention, and the limits placed around a royal daughter. Anthony Armstrong-Jones was a photographer and designer whose work moved through artistic, theatrical, and social circles. Their marriage brought a creative energy into a household that was also one of the most watched in Britain. It would be easy to turn that setting into a neat childhood portrait, either golden or unhappy. The public record does not give us the right to do that. What it does show is that Sarah grew up with both royal connection and artistic influence around her. Her mother cared deeply about music and ballet. Her father had made a name through visual work. These were not distant cultural references. They were part of the world surrounding Sarah and David from the beginning. Sarah's position was unusual even by royal standards. She had the name, the family history, and the visibility that came with being Princess Margaret's daughter. Yet she had more room than her mother had possessed at the same age. Margaret had been born into the immediate line of a reigning monarch and had lived much of her youth as one of the best-known young women in the country. Sarah was close to the institution, but not destined to carry its daily burden. That difference did not remove the pressures of family life. It simply meant Sarah had a choice that Margaret had rarely been given. She could decide how much of her adult identity would depend on being watched. In later years, Sarah did not publicly explain this choice in detail. The direction of her life is visible through the path she followed. The public first knew Sarah as a small figure at great royal occasions. She was a bridesmaid at the wedding of Princess Anne and Captain Mark Phillips in the early 1970s, and later at the wedding of the Prince of Wales and Lady Diana Spencer. Those photographs have been repeated for years because they contain a familiar royal promise: the next generation, formally dressed, taking its place in a continuing family story. But photographs from ceremonial days show only one part of a life. They do not tell us what a child made of the adult tensions around her. Sarah's childhood coincided with a period in which the marriage of Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon became increasingly difficult and increasingly discussed. This was not merely a private problem for a married couple. It became material for newspapers, gossip columns, and public judgment. Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon separated in 1976. Their divorce followed in 1978, the first divorce of a senior member of the royal family for centuries. Sarah was around 12 when her parents separated and around 14 when the divorce was finalized. Those are straightforward facts. Any claim to know exactly what she felt would go beyond the evidence. What can fairly be said is that her teenage years took place while the adults closest to her were being discussed by people who did not know the family. Their marriage, their arguments, and their later relationships were treated as national material. The attention did not stop at the couple themselves. Their children were inevitably part of the public narrative, whether they had asked for that role or not. This is where many versions of Sarah's story become unfair. They use her parents' divorce as proof that she must have rejected her mother, or that she must have been determined to escape the entire family. Neither conclusion is supported by the facts. Sarah remained connected to both sides of her family. She appeared with her mother and brother on an official visit to Hong Kong in the late 1980s. She also remained connected to her father's artistic world. The better reading is more modest. Sarah grew up with a close view of what public attention could do to a private difficulty. Later, she built an adult life with firmer boundaries. That may be connected to the world she had known as a girl, but it remains an interpretation, not a statement she made for public consumption. The evidence lies in the difference between the circumstances of her childhood and the structure of her own life. There was another lesson in her parents' marriage. It showed that talent and glamour do not prevent strain, and that a famous household can still leave its children seeking steadiness elsewhere. Sarah did not publicly condemn either parent. She did something more lasting. She developed a field in which her name could sit on a gallery list rather than a palace program. That field was painting. The first solid sign of her independent adult identity did not arrive through an announcement from Buckingham Palace. It came through education, prizes, and exhibitions. The public might know Lady Sarah Chatto. In the art world, a different professional name began to matter: Sarah Armstrong-Jones. Sarah studied at Camberwell School of Art, where she completed a foundation course before continuing through Middlesex Polytechnic and then the Royal Academy schools. The sequence is important because it shows training rather than a ceremonial association with art. She was not simply a royal relative who spent an afternoon with paints. She entered institutions where progress was measured by study, discipline, and the judgment of other artists. At Middlesex, Sarah studied printed textiles. At the Royal Academy schools, she first completed an undergraduate diploma and then continued with postgraduate work. These details are not glamorous, but they tell us how seriously she approached the discipline. Training asks an artist to meet criticism, revise a piece, and keep going when a first attempt does not work. It is a world in which a famous surname may open a door of curiosity, yet cannot do the work on the easel. That training also made the name Sarah Armstrong-Jones more than a credit line. It became the name attached to a professional record. Gallery visitors could respond to an exhibition without any need to accept a royal narrative first. A painting might be purchased, passed over, discussed, or reviewed on the basis of what was there. For someone who had been visible from birth, that offered an unusual form of fairness. There is a wider point here about women connected to famous families. A pastime can be treated politely. A career creates a standard. Sarah chose the second path. The record of courses, prizes, and shows did not make her immune from press interest, but it gave her a center of gravity outside it. When public attention returned to Princess Margaret, Sarah had somewhere else to stand. At the Royal Academy schools, she received the Windsor and Newton Prize in 1988. 2 years later, she received the Creswick Landscape Prize with its first prize and silver medal. Awards do not settle every question about an artist's work, but they are evidence of professional recognition. They also offered Sarah something unusually valuable for a woman from a famous family, an achievement that had to stand on more than a title. Her work developed through drawings, paintings, landscape, and still life. The Redfern Gallery, which has represented her, has described a practice interested in the textures and atmosphere of particular places, including Sussex chalk, northern rock, granite, and peat. Her paintings can also draw from familiar rooms and domestic objects. These are useful facts about the work. They should not be turned into a coded diary of her relationship with Princess Margaret. Sarah has not offered her paintings as proof of hidden family pain, and no responsible account should do so for her. The professional name matters as much as the subject matter. Sarah Armstrong-Jones is not a disguise, nor is it an attempt to deny where she came from. It is the surname she was born with, used in the context of a professional practice. In a gallery, a viewer meets the artist's work before encountering a royal protocol. That separation gave Sarah an area of life where public interest could be redirected from inherited drama to craft. Her first exhibition at the Redfern Gallery took place in 1995. It was followed by regular solo exhibitions. Her work also appeared in open exhibitions, including the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition and the Sunday Times Watercolor Competition. This was not a single charitable display arranged because of her family. It was a sustained relationship with a respected commercial gallery and with the wider routines of an artist's career. A regular solo exhibition is more demanding than a one-off appearance. It means developing enough work for a public showing, accepting the dates and demands of a gallery program, and returning to the studio after the attention has passed. The Redfern Gallery continued to exhibit Sarah Armstrong-Jones over many years. That continuity is one of the strongest pieces of evidence in her story. Her art was not a royal side note. It was work to which she returned repeatedly. The gallery has noted that she draws inspiration from landscapes and from atmosphere, chalk, rock, rain, mist, sunlight, and the character of particular terrain. It has also noted the place of domestic objects in her work. Those subjects have a practical value for this story. They reveal an artist interested in the world immediately around her, not a celebrity trying to make herself the main event. The paintings may be personal, as all serious work is personal, but it would be wrong to assign a private family message to each canvas. Sarah's art, therefore, becomes a useful correction to the usual royal story. It is possible to be born into public interest and still make a profession that asks the public to concentrate on the work rather than the person. Sarah did not control every headline. No royal relative can do that. But she gave the press fewer opportunities to turn her private life into a serial drama while giving the art world a substantial body of work to assess. There is a particular dignity in that kind of achievement. A public figure can inherit attention, but she cannot inherit the patience needed to keep working after an exhibition closes. She cannot inherit the judgment of a prize panel. She cannot inherit the decision of collectors to return. Sarah's professional record does not require a dramatic declaration of independence. It provides one in a quieter, stronger form. The difference becomes clearer when placed beside the title she carries. Lady Sarah Chatto has a place in royal history. Sarah Armstrong-Jones has a body of work, a training record, and a gallery career. Those identities do not cancel each other out. They give her more than one way to be seen. That may be why her life has often been misunderstood by people who want a simple choice between palace and freedom. Art also connected Sarah to aspects of both her parents without forcing her to repeat either of their public lives. Her father worked in photography and design. Her mother loved the performing arts. Sarah made a professional home in visual art where the work could be presented without her having to turn herself into the subject. It was not a rejection of family influence. It was a way of reshaping that influence. The strength of this choice lies in what it did not demand. Sarah did not need to explain her mother's marriage. She did not need to correct every headline about Princess Margaret. She did not need to trade family stories for attention. Her career gave her a purpose that was visible enough to be real, but protected enough to remain her own. That protection became more important when Sarah built a family of her own. A career can create an identity outside childhood. Marriage tests whether a person can create a daily life outside it as well. Sarah's marriage did not erase the past of either parent. It showed that a different kind of household was possible. During the early 1980s, Sarah spent time in India while working on film productions, including work in the costume department. According to later biographical accounts, this was the period in which she met Daniel Chatto, an actor who was working on a British film in India. The exact details of their first meeting have been repeated in different ways over the years, so the careful point is simply that they met through an artistic and film-related world rather than through a formal royal introduction. Daniel Chatto came from a theatrical family. His father, Tom Chatto, was an actor, and his mother, Roz Chatto, worked as a theatrical agent. Daniel had acted in film and television before developing his own interests in art. Their shared connection to creative work gave Sarah a relationship formed in a world that was familiar to her, but not governed by royal protocol. Their relationship was visible to the public. They were photographed together and later married with the royal family in attendance. Their public record did not turn the marriage into a recurring performance. There was no stream of personal interviews offering a running account of their marriage, and their home did not become an extension of the royal stage. That absence has sometimes been mistaken for a lack of story. In fact, it is part of the story. For a daughter raised in a household whose marriage became material for national discussion, the value of that restraint is easy to see without claiming it was a conscious reaction. Sarah grew up in a family whose private difficulties became public discussion. Daniel also came from a creative family familiar with public work. Their marriage kept professional visibility separate from the parts of family life they chose not to place before the public. A person may work in the arts and still keep family life out of the market for public opinion. Sarah and Daniel married on the 14th of July, 1994, at St. Stephen Walbrook in the city of London. The ceremony was attended by family members and included around 200 guests. It was still a royal family wedding, but it was not constructed as one of the vast national spectacles that had marked other royal marriages. The scale and the location reflected a more contained occasion. It is tempting to call such a marriage a fairy tale simply because it has lasted for more than 3 decades. That would be another easy story, and it would not be fair to any marriage. The public cannot know every difficulty or every private adjustment within the Chatto household. What can be observed is longevity, a shared artistic environment, and a consistent refusal to make their relationship into entertainment for the public. The wedding itself contained a small link between old family history and Sarah's new beginning. She wore the Snowdon floral tiara, a piece associated with her mother's collection. The detail is striking because it resists the claim that Sarah's adulthood was a clean break from Margaret. A daughter can use a family heirloom while arranging a life that is not governed by the same patterns. Continuity and change can exist in the same decision. Sarah and Daniel went on to have 2 sons, Samuel and Arthur. Their children have appeared at major family occasions, but they have not become central characters in a royal drama. Most details of their ordinary lives have remained outside royal coverage. The boys inherited a famous family name and a place in its history, yet both have pursued paths away from constant scrutiny. That does not mean the children were cut off from their grandmother or from the wider family. They were part of it. The public record did not turn their sons into proof of a glossy royal domestic life. For older viewers, this may be one of the most recognizable choices in the entire story. A parent can belong to a prominent family and still refuse to make children carry the emotional weight of that family's public reputation. The marriage also allowed Sarah's name to change in public, while her professional identity remained intact. As Lady Sarah Chatto, she took her place at family occasions. As Sarah Armstrong-Jones, she continued her painting career. The two names marked different contexts rather than different women. One acknowledged marriage and royal connection. The other kept faith with a professional life developed before and after the wedding. For many viewers, this is the emotional center of Sarah's story. A woman who had seen a family marriage discussed in public did not need to turn against her parents in order to build something steadier. She could value them, keep the family connection, and still decide that her own home would have different boundaries. That is not a spectacular act. It is often a difficult and very adult one. The contrast with Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon should be handled carefully. Their marriage broke down in a highly public way. Sarah's marriage has lasted. Those are facts. It would be unfair to announce that Sarah married Daniel in order to escape her parents' example, or to claim that she had solved every problem they faced. The contrast is meaningful without that invention. It shows that children are not sentenced to reproduce the structure of the family they first knew. There is another reason the marriage matters. Sarah's adult identity did not become only that of a wife or mother. She continued to paint and exhibit. Daniel's background in theater and art sat alongside her own professional work. The relationship did not require Sarah to surrender the career that had given her a separate voice. In that respect, the marriage and the work reinforced each other. By choosing what to show and what to keep within the family, Sarah created a life that remained connected to the royal family without being consumed by it. Her public appearances did not vanish. They simply became selective. That distinction is the key to understanding why stories of her having walked away do not hold up. Sarah has appeared at royal weddings, funerals, jubilees, memorials, and other family events. She stood with relatives at moments of national importance, including the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II and the coronation of King Charles III. These are not the actions of someone who had severed ties with her family. They are the actions of a royal relative whose relationship to public service was different from that of a full-time working royal. The phrase private royal relative may sound technical, but it describes Sarah more accurately than either extreme. She is neither a palace employee nor an outsider watching from beyond the gates. Her family position has always remained real, yet her primary work has been as an artist, and her public role has remained limited rather than all-consuming. This position is easier to recognize when the formal calendar calls. Sarah has been present at occasions where family continuity is publicly marked, and she has accepted specific arts roles that require long-term commitment. At other times, she returns to a life that does not provide a weekly royal headline. The pattern is consistent across the years. Her appearances have generally had a clear family or arts purpose. That choice also protects the meaning of the appearances she does make. When Sarah attends a memorial, a funeral, a coronation, or an arts event, the occasion is not competing with a constant stream of personal publicity. Her appearances retain their family or charitable context. This is not evidence of superiority over other relatives. It is simply the public style Sarah has maintained over many years. This balance required discipline. Every rare appearance could be treated by the press as an invitation to ask why she had appeared, what she was wearing, or whether it signaled a change in her relationship with the family. Sarah has rarely supplied the extra material such stories seek. She has allowed her actions to remain ordinary. Attendance at a memorial, support for a cousin, a presence at a family occasion. Her two sons show the same broader pattern. Samuel became a ceramic artist, while Arthur has followed his own path. Their choices are not evidence that Sarah directed their lives in any particular way. They do, however, show that the next generation was not forced into a single royal template. A household close to the monarchy could still make room for work, study, and creative identity outside it. Sarah's closeness to Queen Elizabeth II has often been mentioned in press coverage, but there is no need to turn that into a ranking of family affection. What is clearer is that Sarah remained visibly connected to the family and present at important occasions. The evidence is not a private letter or dramatic declaration. It is the long record of her continued place within the family circle. This matters especially when considering Princess Margaret's final years. As Margaret's health declined, public commentary could easily turn silence into a story of distance, but no reliable evidence shows that Sarah abandoned her mother, and there is no basis for saying she was either absent or a daily carer. The responsible account is narrower. Margaret had 2 children, David and Sarah, and they faced the obligations that followed her death. Princess Margaret suffered a series of health problems and strokes in her later years. She died on the 9th of February, 2002, age 71. Her death brought an end to a life that had been watched with unusual intensity from childhood. It also left her children with the deeply personal and practical work that follows the loss of a parent. For David and Sarah, that work included decisions about their mother's estate. In 2006, a major sale of Princess Margaret's possessions took place at Christie's. The sale drew international attention because many of the objects had been associated with a royal life that the public felt it knew. Jewelry, furniture, paintings, and personal items became part of a widely discussed auction. It is easy to treat a sale like that as a cold verdict on a parent's memory. The facts point to a more complicated reality. The proceeds were intended in part to meet inheritance tax obligations, and some of the proceeds were directed to charity, including the Princess Margaret Fund at the Stroke Association. Estates involve financial duties, legal decisions, and questions of preservation. They do not offer a simple test of love. The scale of public feeling around the auction helps explain why it was so difficult. Some people regarded the items as pieces of national history. Others saw them as the belongings of a mother whose children had a right and a duty to manage her estate. Both reactions could exist at once. Sarah and David did not create that tension. They inherited it, along with the practical obligations that came after Margaret's death. There is a useful lesson in this episode. Public memory often demands that a family preserve every object as proof of loyalty, while private reality requires decisions about tax, storage, ownership, and charity. The sale cannot tell us that Sarah loved her mother less. It tells us that love after bereavement sometimes has to share space with responsibility. That is a far more human truth than the harsher headline. The auction also revealed the burden attached to a famous parent's belongings. A family may inherit objects that carry private memories, public history, and substantial financial value all at once. Whatever David and Sarah felt about each individual item is not ours to invent. Their public responsibility was to deal with an estate that could not be separated from national fascination. The idea that Sarah erased Princess Margaret does not fit the next stage of her public life. After her mother's death, Sarah moved closer to the artistic legacy Margaret had spent years supporting. This is the point where the story changes from speculation about distance to evidence of what Sarah chose to carry forward. Princess Margaret's affection for ballet was not a decorative royal interest. She was the first president of the Royal Ballet in the late 1950s and supported the Royal Ballet School and related organizations for decades. Ballet gave Margaret a public role linked to discipline, performance, and the development of young artists. It was one of the parts of her life that did not depend on gossip or personal drama. Sarah had already served for many years as a vice president within this ballet world. At the Royal Ballet School, she had been vice president since 2004. In 2024, she became president of the Royal Ballet School, succeeding King Charles III after he became its patron. In the same year, Birmingham Royal Ballet announced that she would become its president after serving as vice president. Those appointments are not a sentimental story written by outsiders. They are official responsibilities accepted by Sarah and publicly described by the organizations themselves as a continuation of her mother's legacy. She took on the part of Margaret's legacy that reflected her own work and her own long record of support for the arts. That is the clearest answer to the central question. Lady Sarah's public life did not reproduce the relentless exposure, the expectation that every personal difficulty become a public topic, or the assumption that a royal woman existed chiefly for public consumption. At the same time, her work and public roles preserved a connection through art, ballet, and family responsibility. The result is more interesting than a simple escape story. Sarah did not become a symbol of perfect privacy because no member of her family can be entirely private. She became a woman who set limits. She did not make those limits the subject of a public campaign. She made them part of the architecture of her life. Professional work, a long marriage, a protected household, and selective service. The family's creative thread now extends one generation further. Sarah's elder son, Samuel Chatto, is a ceramic artist. In July 2026, his engagement to Eleanor Exergian was announced. The ring he used to propose was made from porcelain by Samuel himself. It was a small contemporary detail, but it carried a larger family pattern. Princess Margaret's interest in the arts did not disappear with her. It traveled through Sarah's painting and into a grandson's craft. That detail should not turn Sarah's story into a report about her son. Its value lies elsewhere. It shows how a family inheritance can be changed without being discarded. The most enduring inheritance is not always a title, a jewel, or an old photograph. Sometimes it is the permission to make something with one's own hands and call it a life. Lady Sarah Chatto's career, marriage, and public commitments show a different path from Princess Margaret. They do not erase her mother or turn her into a villain. Instead, they carry forward the parts of Margaret's life that could be useful, generous, and creative. Princess Margaret lived in public, and Sarah chose a more guarded life. That contrast is real. It is not proof of rejection. A daughter can love a complicated mother, remain part of a complicated family, and still decide that her own children deserve a different kind of home. In Sarah's case, the evidence points not to abandonment, but to selection. Her public life did not make private life a spectacle. It kept the art, it kept the ballet, it kept her place in the family, and it gave her enough distance to become herself. Lady Sarah Chatto did not repeat Princess Margaret's life, but neither did she erase it. She carried forward the part of her mother that needed no scandal to survive.